like a Senate, like a U.S. Senate, and stop acting like a bumper sticker operation. And I yield the floor.
The senator from Oklahoma.
I just want to make a couple of comments. I said in my earlier comments, there's some good things out of the EDA. The fact is they're all self-reported. There's no data. There's no metrics. Anytime you send money to the state of Oklahoma, I guarantee you the people who are going to get the money are going to like it. But there isn't one metric, one set of metrics that measures the effectiveness of the money that's been spent through EDA in terms of job creation. Fully one-third of the dollars don't get through to completion over the history of the program. You know, the very idea that we would defend, the bureaucracy didn't help us on 9/11 because they were stovepiped. They wouldn't communicate. The bureaucracy failed to ensure the safety of the levees in New Orleans, this same bureaucracy that doesn't need to be controlled. The bureaucracy didn't protect us from the financial crisis in 2008 because we didn't do the oversight. The bureaucracy didn't protect the Gulf from the Deepwater Horizon. We had a bureaucracy that was supposed to be in charge of that, but they didn't do it. The point is, and the SBIR, you had my full support on SBIR. You know that, Senator Landrieu. You had my support on that because that's one of the proven programs inside the SBA administration that actually has metrics on it that works. So the debate is whether or not we hold back the regulatory framework. You know, I find it really ironic. You agree with us in principle but aren't going to vote with us on this amendment because it didn't go through a committee. It is amazing. I'm going to finish my points and then I'll leave the floor because I have something else I have to do. It is amazing the negative effects that we all are hearing from all across the country, every state, every senator's hearing how regulation is drowning out opportunity for investment to create jobs in this country. Every program has some positive aspects to it. The question isn't whether they have positive aspects, it's what's our priority now that we're bankrupt? Where should we be spending the money to where we get the most bang for the buck? And how do we pull back the regulatory framework so that it's common sense oriented rather than bureaucratic oriented? And that's what Senator Snow's trying to do. And to give some type of power to the very people that are being regulated. Because we certainly won't do the oversight. We haven't done the oversight. You know, it's really interesting when the GAO put out this last report on duplication. They're right. They didn't say in these particular programs, but I put out a report 9 months before that that detailed the duplication in these programs, and it was published. So you can find. The point is we're strangling business and job development, small and medium. The big guys can take all this regulation. They're already staffed up. The small businesses can't. The medium-sized businesses can't. We have to give them a way to force common sense on the bureaucracy. And that's all this does. And to not, everybody hears it from all of their constituents, is that the regulation is killing business formation and job creation. Why would we not want to put some balance? I don't understand it. And the real problem with the regulatory agencies is us, because we won't oversight them. Just like there was no oversight hearing on the EDA. Nobody ever asked the question, where are the metrics? We have all this anecdotal evidence how great it is when we give money to the states, that they can do things. But where's the numbers that show the job creation for every $1,000 that gets spent? There's a self-reported, but there's nothing that looks at it to say, here statistically is the way. And if EDA is the best way to create jobs in this country, I'm all for it. But I want to see some data that says that right now. You know, we have job training programs, 47 of them in this country. We spend $18 billion on them a year. We have 104 science, technology, engineering, and math programs across 9 different agencies. We're spending $16 billion on a year. We have no data on either of those programs anywhere. But we got it out there. We have no idea what we're doing because we won't ask the hard questions and we won't study it. Nobody would have 104 science, technology, engineering, math programs. We have 64 programs. 20-some of them are outside the Department of Education to improve teacher training quality. I mean, the reason we're in trouble is because we haven't done our job on oversight. So you can claim anecdotal evidence that something's good, but you ought to know that when we spend $1,000 we don't have today of American people's money because we're borrowing it from China, we ought to be dang certain that that's actually going to create something because our kids are paying the bill. The next generation is going to pay the bill, and they're going to pay that bill through a markedly lowered standard of living. With that, I yield the floor.
Senator from Maine.
Yes. How much time is remaining on the Republican side?
13 minutes.
13 minutes. Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to make a few points, Mr. President. Really, it's about solving problems. That's what this is all about. And it truly amazes me that an amendment on regulatory reform that everybody agrees on principle and everything else, that it goes to the heart of the issues concerning the economic well-being of small businesses and hence America's well-being in these desperate times. And yet we can't manage to get together and to work on these issues. Now, I made a number of good faith changes in my legislation, would have done more if I heard any response on the other side to working those out. I made 5 major changes to the proposition back in April to respond to this, but there was no response. And then I hear about these hearings. Can somebody please tell me where it is in the rules of the Senate that every amendment has to have a hearing? We just had a major vote yesterday, Mr. President, on interchange for the second time. Important to small businesses. But even the Committee of Jurisdiction didn't have a hearing. So this is, again, I describe as politics of obfuscation. Get to the heart of the matter and solve the problems for America. It isn't about who authors it, who's doing it. Let's do it. That's the point. We're not doing it. We're just sitting here, talking, recessing, got to go home today, got to do something else, got to have recesses. We've got 5 committees who have jurisdiction on this issue. We're going to have a roadmap pretty soon. I don't want to go home and tell my constituents, well, what happened to regulatory reform? Well, let me get this straight. Let me get this straight. We have 5 committees. There are a number of bills, and time's running out, and people have to leave, and we can't have enough time to debate this. That's what I was told this morning. All of a sudden, I was given a call saying, sorry, you're going to have to do it right now. I said, well, is the bill over? We just started. There are a number of pending amendments that haven't even been addressed yet. Let's vote on those. This is an important issue. Let's give this the equivalency of, the interchange amendment. Let's do something that's important for small business. Absolutely not. This is about jobs at a very difficult time in America. And let me repeat, 40 months at the start of the 4 deepest post-war recessions, our economic output averaged 7.6%. Here we are. Our GDP has only increased 0.1%, Mr. President. Those are terrible numbers. But behind those numbers are people and human beings, because it means we're not creating jobs. Bureaucracies mean, by definition, and I read, a concentration of power. Absolutely. They're unelected. We're elected. We understand the problems, and even the president. Let's read this headline. Obama to scale back regulations in effort to spur economic growth. And what's interesting about all of this? This has been happening. No one's accusing the president of decimating the environment or the workplace or health care. Understanding that. And 6 days after I was denied a vote on this very bill where I made 5 different adjustments to respond to the other side, you have the president's Economic Competitiveness Council coming out with 4 major priorities. one of which is regulations. Need to improve regulations and decades of overlapping and uncoordinated regulations, even by the administration, this White House's own estimate, that regulations this last decade cost anywhere from $44 to $62 billion. Last year's alone was $26 billion increase over that $1.7 trillion. This is a serious issue, Mr. President. I'll work it out. Can we work it out? Can we do it? Do we have the capacity to work on issues anymore thoroughly and deliberatively? It's been almost 2 months and we haven't gotten any further than the man on the moon. We don't even have a hearing. Somewhere somebody's got bills. Great, bring them up. Let's debate them. Let's compare them. Let's do something. Let's do something for small business. They desperately need it, Mr. President. And now I'll be glad to yield to the Senator from Illinois.
The Senator from Illinois.
Thank you. I would like, in this context, to focus on economic policy, to look at where we are right now with the state of the economic union and the state of Illinois. If we look at the basic numbers, we see that we will take in about $2.1 trillion in tax revenue. But our government is currently projected to spend $3.4 trillion in tax revenue, yielding a deficit of approximately $1.3 trillion that we will have to borrow from the American people, China, and other foreign powers. Total unfunded liabilities of the federal government are $61 trillion, yielding a per-American debt of $196,000 per American currently. When we look at economic growth and the way to expand the available pie for the United States, our economy last year grew at a 2.8% rate. China, on the other hand, grew at 10.3%, and Libya, currently under attack by NATO, grew at 4.2%. In fact, quiz question, which economy grew more last year, the United States or Iran? Answer, the Iranian economy grew by a faster rate than the United States. The situation probably is even more bleak in the state of Illinois. For the state of Illinois, we're going to take in about $27 billion in revenue, spending $33 billion for a $5.8 billion gap. This is for a state whose credit rating is deteriorating quite rapidly, having not funded its pensions to a greater degree than almost any other state. Unfunded liability of the state of Illinois at $62 billion for a per-citizen debt on top of the federal debt of $4,800. When we look at our state and its economic growth, the state of Illinois at just 1.9% growth. Other states, Wisconsin, even with its highly controversial governor, now rapidly improving its business climate at 2.5%. A state rated as the #1 state to create jobs and businesses in America, Texas at 2.8%, and the state that is on fire, the state of Indiana, at 4.6%. This is clearly a sign that things are going well in Indiana, things are going well in China, things are even going better in Libya than in the United States. And it shows that we need to change course for our country economically, to back the amendment of the gentlewoman that she has here, and to make sure that we can lay out better, more pro-productive policies like the Small Business Bill of Rights that represents 10 new policies to accelerate economic growth on behalf of that entity which represents half of all the jobs in the United States and my own states. These are private sector jobs. They are sustainable. They do not depend on a failed stimulus, which is now running out of gas. And given the records here, I think we can see that it's clear that we ought to go back to economic fundamentals to correct our system and look clearly at the state of economics where we are now. And with that, I'd like to yield back to the gentlelady from Maine and thank her for the time.
Mr. President?
The Senator from Maine.
Yes, I'd now like to yield to the Senator from Massachusetts, Senator Brown.
The senator from Maine has 4 minutes, and the remaining time for the Democratic side is 35 minutes.
Mr. President? Mr. President?
The senator from Maine.
Yes. I would ask unanimous consent for additional time since the vote isn't going to occur to 2:15, so we could equally divide it.
I object.
The objection is heard. Senator from Maine.
Yes, Mr. President, I now yield the remainder of the time to Senator Brown. It's just regrettable, since this is an important issue, that we couldn't have more time until then on this key issue.
The senator from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to begin by expressing my support for what Senator Snowe has been doing and for the EDA reauthorization bill. I applaud the committee for producing a good and comprehensive bill. And as you know, these EDA grants provide vital resources not only for Massachusetts, thank you, not only for Massachusetts economic development and businesses, but also other states throughout the country to help communities get back on their feet in this tough economic climate. For that reason, the reauthorization of this is incredibly important, and I would encourage that it be done so. I rise to speak about 2 amendments in this bill that affect the stability of our small businesses. Senator Snowe and Senator Coburn's Freedom Act to reform the small business regulatory system is one that I have consistently supported because it's a common-sense solution. When I'm traveling around my state, no matter where I go, no matter who I speak with, from CEOs all the way down to the worker who's just doing the everyday work, over and over is their plea to get rid of the one-size-fits-all federal regulations that are prohibiting businesses. We need business certainty and stability in order to create an economic climate to make jobs not only be created but to be retained, not only in Massachusetts but throughout the country. And this amendment would require that federal agencies can conduct comprehensive analysis on the potential impact of regulations on small businesses, and has the support of the NFIB and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And simply put, burdensome regulations are hurting our small businesses and job creators and preventing them from growing and hiring. And it's a shame that this amendment got caught up in partisan volleying in the SBIR reauthorization. I'm happy to have an opportunity to speak about it today. I also want to turn to the Senate's attention to the amendment I have filed, Amendment 405, to repeal the 3% withholding tax, a malignant and business-threatening provision. It's based on S-164, the Withholding Tax Relief Act of 2011, which enjoys bipartisan support and is critically needed now. The ranking member of the Small Business Committee, Senator Snowe, is a co-sponsor, as well as 14 of my colleagues. We need to repeal once and for all this onerous and costly unfunded mandate. This is a jobs amendment, plain and simple, and it would repeal a part of our tax code that promises to kill jobs. As you know, Mr. President, we've had many comments about how that this bill would in fact cost potentially as high as $75 billion to actually implement, and the monies received back to the federal government will be about $8 billion over that same period. It's absurd. Any tax that costs more to implement that brings in revenues should be repealed immediately. And 2 months ago, I received a letter from Massachusetts State Secretary of Finance, Jay Gonzalez, warning Congress of the inevitable threat to small businesses' ability to survive in this economic climate if we allow the continuation of this stealth tax. So I would encourage that...
Senator's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would encourage that we also adopt that amendment. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, thank you. I know that the senator from California was on the floor this morning, Senator Boxer, advocating for the passage of her bill and urging colleagues to vote against the Snowe amendment. And I'm here to support that position. I'd like to respond briefly to Senator Colburn's last couple of statements about where the bureaucracy failed, and he didn't have to remind me, of course, that the bureaucracy failed to respond to Katrina and Rita, the largest disasters by far in the history of the country. But we've spent 6 years fixing that bureaucracy, not printing bumper stickers for re-election campaigns. And you know what? It's worked. because our efforts to fix the bureaucracy have really helped the people of Missouri and Arkansas and Tennessee and Montana and Indiana that are currently experiencing terrible disasters as we speak. And the bureaucracy that showed up at the Superdome is a lot better in many, many, many ways. It's better today than it was for the bureaucracy that showed up at the Superdome. And that's because we had hundreds of hours of committee meetings where this hard work is done to bring significant and important bills and changes that take debate, not on the Senate floor, but take debate in the work of the committees. When you're working on major pieces of legislation that have major impacts, that's where it is done. Besides the Freedom Act that is on the floor today, there is the Regulatory Responsibility for Our Economy Act, sponsored by Senator Roberts, with 46 co-sponsors. I'm assuming that there are, I don't have the list, but I'm assuming there are Democratic and Republican co-sponsors. That's a major regulatory relief bill. There is a bill by Senator Collins called the CURB Act, Clearing Unnecessary Regulatory Burdens, the CURB Act. It has 2 co-sponsors. And then there's a smaller bill by Senator Portman that has no co-sponsors, but he is the lead sponsor that has a, it looks like to me, it's a smaller bill and has just limited scope, but nonetheless on regulatory reform. There could be 12 other bills filed in the Senate, I don't know, and hundreds of other bills filed in the House. Forget the House bills. When bills like this are filed in the Senate, the usual route and the most effective route is to go through the Committee of Jurisdiction. You can understand in this topic, which is so broad, regulatory reform, it's regulatory reform in the Department of Commerce and regulatory reform in the Department of EPW, Environment and Public Works, regulatory reform for the Department of Homeland Security, regulatory reform in the Department of Defense. There are many committees of jurisdiction, but what everyone has agreed to is to have the hearing in the Homeland Security, which is broad jurisdiction, and get the work done. Senator Lieberman is not here today because he's on Jewish holiday. He has said time and time again he will have this hearing in the committee, and that is the appropriate place, so we can come forward with a bill on regulatory relief. There are a couple of reasons why this particular approach is flawed, and I'd like to read the comments, if you can get the comments from the administration. I'd like to read just 3 specific reasons why this particular Freedom Act is not in the proper position that it should be. But the way to fix it is not debating on the floor of the Senate on a bill that is not germane to really to the bill that we're debating, that we're trying to pass. It's to have this kind of debate in committee so that we can work out these details. Senator Snowe has shown herself to be in the past and still today willing to work in a very cooperative manner, and the place to do this is in committee. 1, the bill as currently drafted would allow judicial review before the completion of rulemaking. That provision in the Freedom Act would undermine regulatory certainty, making it harder for businesses, not easier, harder for businesses to plan for the future and compete in the marketplace. It would also invite excessively costly and unwieldy litigation. We don't want to have more lawsuits. We want to have less lawsuits. That's one of the problems that small businesses are facing today. Lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. The last thing we want to do is encourage more of them. Many people have reviewed the technical writing of the bill in its current form and believe it will result in more lawsuits, not less. We'd like to fix that in committee. The amendment would make it harder, not easier, to see the actual cost of regulation. By expanding the Regulatory Flexibilities Act definition to include indirect effects, which I can understand why she wants to do it, but in interpreting the language as the Senator has written it, this legislation would likely undermine any reliable and meaningful economic analysis of regulation, thereby distracting the agencies from focusing on what the actual impacts of the rules would be. And finally, the amendment inappropriately links regulatory decisions to budget cuts. Decisions about regulation should be based on sound economics and science and not on the threat of budget cuts. This is just a preliminary review of some of the current problems. And Senator Snowe is right. I guess if we stayed on the floor for the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and the other senators who are not on the floor would agree to come and debate their bills on the floor, which is highly unusual. But why not just go to the Homeland Security Committee, have all of the sponsors of these major pieces of legislation present their bills, and have that committee work through these technical difficulties, because it is an important issue. Many of us support reg reform. We know that there are some burdens, particularly on small business. We'd like to get it fixed. So let's fix it instead of continuing to rail on the subject on every bill that comes before of the Senate, whether it has anything to do with reg reform or not. And then one thing I want to point out to the Senator, and I point this out with the greatest respect. About 6 months ago, or longer now, we were both on the floor trying to pass the Small Business Jobs Act bill, one of the most significant bills that have actually helped to bolster this economy, help provide literally billions of dollars of loans to small business who couldn't get them anywhere. Their credit card companies had raised the rates so high, or their banks had shut down their lines of credit. Senator Snowe and I worked together to bring a bill to the floor, and we did, and passed it, unfortunately, without the support of the other side of the aisle. But in that debate, the senator from Maine said, because I included in that bill with a 60-vote margin, I got Senator Voinovich and Senator Lemieux to vote for the Small Business Lending Fund, which was a little unusual. She said, not included in the overall, first and foremost, it has not had a single hearing with respect to this issue. And in my view, it does not, it does resurrect the controversial TARP program, and because it hasn't had a hearing, this should not pass. And yet, within a year, she's back arguing against that argument, that her bill, which hasn't had any hearing in the committee, should pass. So, you know, there is some inconsistency here. Now, I say this with the greatest respect to the senator from Maine, but we have got to, if we want to be serious about reg reform, do have this debate in the Committee of Jurisdiction, which is right now Homeland Security, and then have the other chairman of the committees, the other chairman, try to, you know, cooperate with that committee and bring something to the floor we will be happy, many of us, to vote for. But doing this in this way is not helpful. It's not going to fix the problem. It's only going to make the burden on small business worse, and we've got to move past it. So I want to put into the record the statement that Senator Snowe made on the SBLF. I want to put into the record the 3 very clear explanations about why the bill in its current form should not be agreed to. Can these be fixed? Yes. But this is not the place on the Senate floor when there are many other bills as well. Senator Snowe could remain, the senator from Maine could remain the main sponsor because she's put in the most work. She's been, she's been a tireless advocate. She should get tremendous praise for bringing forth this issue and keeping the fires burning and pushing the Senate to this end, and that would be, it would be terrific. And many of us would join that effort. But this is not the bill to do it on. This is not the place to do it. And I would suggest that, again, taking this to the Committee of Jurisdiction, working out, bringing the administration forward so that we could actually make some real progress on curbing regulatory overreach by the federal government would be welcomed by all. I'm going to suggest the absence of the quorum. I understand. I see the senator from Vermont is here on the floor. I'm assuming he wants to talk about this and others. And I think, Mr. Chairman, how much time do we have remaining? I'm sorry, would the clerk tell us how much time we have remaining?
24 minutes.
Thank you.
President,
The senator from Vermont.
I ask unanimous consent that the final 10 minutes be equally divided and controlled between Senators Snowe and Boxer, with Senator Boxer controlling the final 5 minutes.
Without objection.
And, Mr. President, I yield myself 10 minutes of majority time.
Without objection.
Mr. President, there are a number of huge issues facing our country. Our middle class is collapsing. Poverty is increasing. We are in 2 wars. We are concerned about global warming, quality of our education, and massive unemployment. So this country today has its share of serious problems that we have got to address. Right now, a whole lot of attention, not inappropriately, is on our very large deficit and a $14+ trillion national debt. And this is an issue which is perhaps going to come to a head within the next few months as it becomes tied to whether or not we raise the debt ceiling. And I just want to say a few words on this issue. Number one, when we talk about deficit reduction, Mr. President, it is important for us to understand how we got to where we are today. How did it happen? How do we have a $1.5 trillion deficit this year and a $14+ trillion national debt? And let's remember that not so many years ago, at the end of President Clinton's tenure, this country had a significant budget surplus, and the expectation was that that surplus was going to grow in the years to come. But then a number of things happened during the Bush years. Number one, we became engaged in 2 wars. Number two, we passed a Medicare Part D prescription drug program. Number three, we bailed out Wall Street. And number four, we gave huge tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country. And then as a result of the Wall Street-caused recession, revenue dropped, and the result was that we now have a very, very high deficit and a very large national debt. But it is important to remember how we got to where we are today. It is also important when we talk about deficit reduction to take a look at American society today in order to determine what is a fair way to address deficit reduction. And when we look at American society today, the trends are very, very clear. The middle class is in many ways disappearing as a result of stagnant or, in fact, lowered wages for millions and millions of American workers. Median family income over the last 10 years has gone down by about $2,500. The middle class is hurting. Many millions of Americans, in fact, have left the middle class and entered the ranks of the poor. Poverty is increasing. But at the same time as the middle class is shrinking and poverty is increasing, there is another reality that we cannot ignore, although I'm afraid many of my colleagues choose to ignore it. And that is that the people on top are doing phenomenally well. Over a recent 25-year period, 80% of all new income went to the top 1%. Top 1% now earns more income than the bottom 50%. And when we talk about distribution of wealth, we have the top 400 Americans, the 400 wealthiest Americans, owning more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans. and that gap between the very rich and everybody else is growing wider. And it's important to discuss that issue about what's happening to the middle class, to lower-income people, and the growing gap between the wealthy and everybody else when we address the issue of deficit reduction. Now, my Republican colleagues in the House came up with an idea that I think most people almost can't even believe that they would pass it. It seems so incomprehensible. So at a time when the middle class is really, really hurting, things are getting worse as a result of the recession, our Republican colleagues say, well, what we want to do is move toward deficit reduction by making savage cuts in Medicaid, in education, in infrastructure, in nutrition, in virtually every program that low and moderate income Americans depend upon. And furthermore, what we want to do in the House, what they have done, is to end Medicare as we know it, convert it into a voucher program, give seniors a check for $8,000, and have them go out and get a plan from a private insurance company, which clearly will be totally inadequate for most seniors and end up raising their out-of-pocket expenses. And then when it comes to the wealthiest people who are doing phenomenally well, not only do our Republican colleagues not ask the wealthiest people in this country or the largest corporations to pay one nickel more in taxes to help us with deficit reduction, they come up with this brilliant idea that we're going to give $1 trillion in tax breaks over a 10-year period to the wealthiest people in America. So the rich are getting richer. They get tax breaks. The middle class is shrinking, and what they are asked to do is to assume huge cuts in programming, which will impact them very, very strongly. This is clearly the Robin Hood proposal in reverse. We're taking from working families who are really hurting and giving it to the wealthiest people who are doing phenomenally well. Now, Mr. President, the Republican plan is clearly absurd, and I think most Americans understand that. The question is, what will the President do? What will the Democrats do? And it is my very strong hope that the Democrats have got to be strong on this issue. The President has got to be strong on this issue. And that the President has got to go out to the American people and win the support that is there for a deficit reduction package of shared sacrifice. To say very clearly to the American people that no, we are not going to move toward deficit reduction solely on the backs of the most vulnerable people in this country. No, we're not going to decimate Medicare so that elderly people will not be able to get the health care they need when they are old and sick. No, we're not going to throw millions and millions of people off of Medicaid and endanger families who have their parents in nursing homes. That we must have shared sacrifice, that the wealthy and large corporations must be involved and also contribute toward deficit reduction. So there is a lot of responsibility on the President, but let me make it very clear. I personally, as a member of the Budget Committee, as the Senator from Vermont, will not be supporting any package that does not call for shared sacrifice. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. working on a bill.
We're in a quorum
I would
call.
ask that that quorum call be dispensed with, please.
Without objection.
Thank you. We're working on a bill that's a jobs bill. Plain and simple. It doesn't have any fancy parts to it. It's a reauthorization of a program that was set up in 1965. The purpose was very clear, to go into areas in our states where the communities are hurting for jobs, where the communities are hurting for business. And it works in a way that every dollar we put into the program attracts $7 of private investment. And I'll show you the job creation on some of these charts that we see. Take me a second to get it. At the $500 million funding level that's authorized in this bill, the EDA is projected to create up to 200,000 jobs a year, and over the life of the bill, up to 1 million jobs. And it's done at a very low cost per job. $3,000 per job is what it costs federal taxpayers because of all the leverage that comes in as cities join in, counties join in, and so on. I have a list of Kathy, if you could give me of the projects that we're going to talk about today. I have talked about a number of projects that have been funded through the EDA over the course of this debate the last few days. And I talked about them in California and Minnesota, and I wanted to add just a couple of other recent projects from across the country. In California, EDA awarded $3 million to the Inland Valley Development Agency in a county that's going through some tough times, San Bernardino, to support the renovation of an existing building at the former Norton Air Force Base. This project is going to help the conversion of that base into a commercial and light industrial area, attracting new companies who are interested in locating there. This investment, funded by the Department of Defense's Office of Economic Adjustment and administered by the EDA, is part of a $3.6 million project that will create 100 jobs and generate $20 million in private investment. So here you have a $3 million investment that is going to be leveraged to $20 million. It's pretty extraordinary, and this is the bill we're talking about. In Florida, the EDA awarded nearly $4 million to construct a new wastewater system for western Palm Beach County. The region suffered flooding in '08 from tropical storms Hannah and Faye, which caused environmental damage that closed local businesses. The construction is going to support 3 city industrial parks, a general aviation airport, as well as major inland port and intermodal center that are being developed. And that investment is part of a $5.3 million project that will create 240 jobs, save 270 jobs, and generate $48 million in private investment. So a $4 million investment attracting $48 million in private investment. In Idaho, we have a very good example of a $4.4 million grant to the College of Southern Idaho in Twin Falls to fund the construction of the Applied Technology and Innovation Center. This is a new LEED certified facility, will help the college meet the region's needs for a higher skilled workforce. And they will learn to operate computer-driven manufacturing equipment and maintain alternative energy systems and the use of sound construction processes for these green buildings. This investment is part of a $6.9 million project that will create 486 jobs. In Indiana, EDA provided $2.4 million. In Kansas, a $1.4 million to the city of Hutchinson. And I'll go on with this in my remaining time that I'll have later. But the point is, this is a jobs bill, and it's being hijacked by a slew of amendments. And I see the handwriting on the wall. I've been here long enough to know what's going on. There's no cooperation. We've got everything from the Snow Amendment to endangered species, dealing with a chicken that somebody wants to take off the endangered species list. I mean, you know, I wasn't born yesterday, as you can tell. And I know what's happening here. This is a dance. It's a slow dance. And it unfortunately signals to me maybe the slow death of this bill. And I think that's really sad. When you have a bill that has been supported by Republican presidents, Democratic presidents over the years. And the last vote on this floor, unanimous in '04, unanimous consent. George W. Bush signed it. Now, you know, I have fought George W. Bush in a number of areas. He and I saw eye to eye on this one. This isn't controversial. So I hope we can dispose of this amendment, and I will have more to say on the amendment in a couple of minutes. I would yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the senator from Maine has the next 5 minutes.
Mr. President, I would urge my colleagues to support this amendment. It's about jobs. It's about small business. It's about the well-being of American families. Just remember this, the stark numbers, the unemployment rate at 9.1%, the average being over the last 2.5 years 9.4%. 23 out of the last 28 months, unemployment has been at 9% or higher. Housing prices are at the lowest level since mid-2002. This is the longest recession since 1948, since we were engaged in record keeping. These are stark, grim numbers. That's what regulatory reform is all about. And what I'm hearing here today is a bureaucratic process and response, exactly what we're trying to attack. This isn't indiscriminate, as some have described on the other side of the aisle about this regulatory reform measure. It's very consistent, and I know the senator from Louisiana was talking about several of the issues, and I'd like to go through them. First of all, she mentioned about the concerns in judicial review, but this was exactly the provision that she and Senator Cardin introduced in their own legislation in the 111th Congress. The senator also spoke about tying budget cuts to the SBA, to this amendment as a way of paying for some of the costs and defraying some of the costs of this amendment. But again, those were proposed by the Small Business Administration, the Inspector General, and they were in the administration in the President's budget. The senator from Louisiana talked about the problems with considering indirect economic effects of small businesses when issuing rules. But again, we use the exact same language that came from the President's chief small business regulatory appointee, the chief advocate at Small Business Administration. So this isn't indiscriminate, but a mischaracterizing the provisions because I haven't bothered to read the bill. And I made a number of changes in order to address the concerns on the other side. If there were further concerns, I would have addressed those as well. So I think we better make sure that we get our facts straight, because it's about small businesses and jobs. That's what it is about, Mr. President. That's what this is about. And we're just stalling, deferring, delaying. We heard about hearings. We didn't have hearings since I was denied a vote on this very issue on May 4th. The President came out a few days later and said regulatory reform was one of the top 4 issues for America in economic growth and job creation. Then we hear all about this bureaucratic conversation about hearings and multiple jurisdictions and committees and committees. Well, I have to say, Mr. President, I've never known amendments to require hearings before they're considered on the floor. In fact, I know the senator from California had 19 amendments in the last Congress. 19 amendments, 8 of which were accepted, and none had hearings. Yesterday, we had a major hearing on interchange. We didn't have a hearing on that. Major issue, didn't have a hearing the first time it was considered and adopted. I'm just making a point. This is just bringing up issues to obfuscate, to obscure a major issue. I don't know exactly what the concern is, to be honest with you, Mr. President. There are some issues here to address, then let's address them. But you're just postponing, conversation, debating. The talk goes nowhere. There are no hearings. There's no nothing. No, the President scaled back regulations that I said earlier, and I'm reading it again, in an effort to spur economic growth, including some Environmental Protection Agency. He didn't undercut the Endangered Species Act. He didn't look at all these other issues. Nobody's accusing him of scaling back every environmental law that's ever been on the books. So I think that we ought to get away from extreme mischaracterizations and inaccuracies and untruths here. Let's talk about the facts. Let's read the bill. Let's know what we're talking about and get our facts straight. This goes to the heart of economic growth. It goes to jobs. It goes to the American people's well-being.
Minutes. Here's what I want to say. Yes, I've offered many amendments on this floor, as have all of my colleagues. But if I see an amendment, and colleagues see an amendment that could hurt, we believe, the health of people, I'm going to say, yeah, let's have a hearing. I want to show you a picture of a child with asthma. It is not, she is beautiful. This is not a pretty picture. I'll show you another picture of a little boy with asthma. That is also a beautiful child and a terrible picture. And let me tell you, we're trying to protect these children. We're trying to protect our families. We're trying to stop premature deaths. And how do we do it? Yes, we have regulations. And have they worked? You bet they have. And that's why I say, if you're going to change them, yes, I hope we would look at the, everybody's motivated in the right direction. Jobs, absolutely. But I got to tell you, when you're sick, you can't go to work. And if a breadwinner dies prematurely, the family is destitute. And let me show you just one act that would be impacted by this Snowe amendment and why I think we ought to have an alternative amendment. If you look at the study that was required by Congress, you find out that in just 2010 alone, the Clean Air Act prevented 160,000 cases of premature death. If you look in 2010 alone, 1.7 fewer asthma attacks. If you look at acute heart attacks prevented, 130,000. What happens in the Snowe amendment, all you're going to look at is the economic benefits, not the health benefits. Mr. President, it flies in the face of common sense and our moral responsibility here. So here's what I see wrong with this amendment. It hurts protection for families and communities. It stops or delays important protections for those people. It ignores public health and safety benefits, only looks at the benefits of economics. Yes, we have to do that, but we also need a balanced approach. As I said, if someone is sick and they can't go to work, they can't keep a job. So it would also create additional expensive litigation. The amendment allows polluters to sue federal agencies during the public comment period on a proposed federal safeguard that allows one polluter to hold up an important, let's say, drinking water or clean air protection standard for months, maybe years. So I urge a no vote on this. Let's get together and come up with something that balances economic growth with protection of the health of our families. And I would yield the floor, and I hope that we would now go to a vote under the previous order. I would ask for the yeas and nays on the amendment.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. All time is yielded back. And the question is on amendment number 290, and the yeas and nays have been ordered. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander, Ms. Ayotte, Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Begich. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bingaman. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Boxer. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts. Mr. Brown of Ohio. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell, Mr. Cardin, Mr. Carper, Mr. Casey, Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Coates, Mr. Coburn, Mr. Cochran, Ms. Collins, Mr. Conrad, Mr. Coons, Mr. Corker, Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Dement, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Enzi, Mrs. Feinstein, Mr. Franken, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mrs. Hagan, Mr. Harkin, Mr. Hatch, Mr. Heller, Mr. Hoven, Mrs. Hutchison, Mr. Inhofe, Mr. Inouye, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Johans, Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. Kerry, Mr. Kirk, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Cole, Mr. Kyle, Ms. Landrieu, Mr. Lautenberg, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Lee, Mr. Levin, Mr. Lieberman, Mr. Lugar, Mr. Manchin, Mr. McCain, Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, Mr. Nelson of Florida, Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, Mr. Reed of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Snow, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Mr. Webb, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Senators voting in the affirmative: Alexander, Barrasso, Blunt, Bozeman, Brown of Massachusetts, Coates, Coburn, Corker, Crapo, Dement, Enzi, Hutchison, Inhofe, Isaacson, Johans, Kyle, Lee, Lugar, McCain, McConnell, Moran, Portman, Roberts, Rubio, Snow, Tester, Toomey, and Wicker. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Grassley. Aye. Mr. Kirk. Mr. Kirk. Aye. Mr. Franken. Senators voting in the negative: Akaka, Begich, Bingaman, Blumenthal, Boxer, Brown of Ohio, Cantwell, Cardin, Casey, Coons, Durbin, Feinstein, Franken, Hagan, Inouye, Kerry, Cole, Lautenberg, Lieberman, Menendez, Mikulski, Murray, Reed of Rhode Island, Reed of Nevada, Sanders, Schumer, and Whitehouse. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Harkin, no. Ms. Landrieu. Ms. Landrieu, no. Mr. Merkley, no. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chambliss, aye. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Baucus, no. Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall of New Mexico, no. Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham, aye. Mr. Paul, aye. Ms. Collins. Ms. Collins, aye. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett. No. Mr. Heller. Mr. Heller. Aye. Conrad. Mr. Conrad. No. Mr. Vitter. Mr. Vitter. Aye. Ms. Stabenow. Ms. Stabenow. No. Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson of Florida. No. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Hoven. Aye. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin. Aye. Mr. Risch. Mr. Risch. Aye. Mr. Webb. Mr. Webb. No. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, no. Mr. Manchin. Mr. Manchin. Aye. Mr. Cochran. Mr. Cochran. Aye. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Cornyn. Aye. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Pryor. Aye. Ms. Ayotte. Ms. Ayotte. Aye. Mr. Levin. Mr. Levin.